My name is Cameron Feaster. I am going to be introducing here Doug Smith, which doesn't hardly need any introduction, but I like to do it none the same. So, this is Doug Smith. He has been working with wolves for many years. He's well known for his work in Yellowstone National Park. He is the wolf restoration project leader out in Yellowstone National Park since 1994, if I'm not mistaken. He received his bachelor's from University of Idaho, his master's from Michigan Tech, and his PhD from the University of Nevada. And so for this, he is going to be talking a little bit about the history of the Yellowstone National Park and as well as some of his experiences in it as well regarding wolves and their restoration to that region. So I'm going to hand it right over to you, Doug, and take it away.
Okay, thank you, Cameron. Very nice to be here. Have not done this kind of thing too much, despite tons and tons and tons of public speaking. I've never kind of done the who am I speaking to here? And someone told me I should tape this thing when I'm done, so I'm not spied upon. So this is a very new experience for me. So all I'm going to do is try and give you an introduction to Yellowstone wolves, what we're doing, what we found out, what we hope to accomplish. And then we have a little bit of footage of how we catch wolves that hopefully you'll find that interesting. And then I guess the main purpose of this is to have a dialogue, which will be much easier for me, given that when I'm public speaking, you're actually looking at people. And that's not the case here. So I'd like to start off by saying how important Yellowstone is for wolves, but not just for wolves, for nature. I'm a little bit of a pessimist by upbringing because I love nature. And Yellowstone is one of the premier examples worldwide. There's so much great nature around the world, but in the world, Yellowstone ranks up there as being a premier area for preserving wild nature. And that's very, very important for wolves because they're kind of the signature species for nature. In other words, it's a conversation worth having, and maybe we'll have it, that how can you have true nature without wolves in it? And that was indeed what Yellowstone was like for most of its history. 1872, predator control was occurring. Early park administrators didn't like wolves, wanted to kill them all off. And actually that killing had begun well before Yellowstone was a park in 1872. Some writers would say 100 years before, late 1700s. So Yellowstone was deeply impacted by humanity for a long time. And so the last wolf was killed in 1926. It was a wolfless landscape all the way until we did the reintroduction in 1995, 96, and 97. A lot of people, 97 was included. A lot of people forget about the sawtooth pups from Choteau, Montana. And so that event is very important because it transformed Yellowstone. It also arguably, and maybe we can have this conversation too, transformed how the world thinks about wolves. Because like it or not, so much of the news about wolves is bad. They kill livestock occasionally, rarely. They kill elk and deer, moose, caribou. Occasionally, once in a great while, there's a human safety issue, and all these things play big in the press every time. And these are simmering issues that won't ever go away. So Yellowstone, most of the news is good. And that's been good for nature, that's been good for wolves. And we've tried to capitalize on that by making Yellowstone a world-class wolf research project. Now, we do have management concerns. This is one of the best places in the world to view wolves. So we have the situation of loving something to death. We have a lot of people that come out. There's drama involved with that. There's all kinds of things. But in general, those are small problems. The big problems for wolves are what's their place in a human-dominated world. I mean, we control the world. We even control Yellowstone, but our footprint is less. And so we want to give wolves and other nature a big playing field. And so we also want to communicate that message to folks like you. Most of you who are listening are probably pro-wolf. There's probably some anti-wolf people too. That always happens. That's fine. Let's talk about it. But we want to get that message out there. This is reversing the tide of kind of a lot of bad news. And so Yellowstone now is a very different place than wolves started. And that's something that is hotly debated. But there's no question that some of this, a lot of this is due to wolves coming back. Now, cougars have come back simultaneously. Grizzly bears and black bears were never eliminated, but their numbers have increased. They were much lower, like below 100 grizzly bears in the 70s in Yellowstone. Now there's over 150 in the park and over 700 in the ecosystem. Some people say 1,000 in the ecosystem. So bears have come back, cougars have come back, wolves have come back, and that's a very important point. A lot of people say it's just wolves. No, the whole carnivore community has been restored. In fact, to a point where maybe it's better than it's ever been in park history. Remembering what I said 5 minutes ago at the beginning of my talk. And in fact, as wild and beautiful and free as northern Canada is, and Alaska is kind of a different story because they kill predators up there in many places, state lands for sure, possibly wildlife refuges now. But the mix of carnivores in Yellowstone is as diverse as any place in North America. And if it's equal, Northwest Montana, British Columbia, Alberta have the same mixes, but they don't occur at the densities. So Yellowstone may have the densest, most diverse, large carnivore community of any place in North America. To a lot of people, that's bad news. To the National Park Service and others, that's great news. That's something we should talk about, something we should embrace. And there are fewer elk. And wolves have had a hand in that, or a paw in that. But it's not all wolves. Human management was designed outside the park to cause the elk herd to decrease. And that recovery of those other carnivores that I talked about are a big part of that too. We're working right now to figure out what proportion of that's due to wolves. And we're trying to tease that out. This is a very hard thing to do. But the idea, this is a hard idea to communicate to Americans. Less is more is very, very operative here because 20,000 plus elk in the northern Yellowstone elk herd was probably too many. However, a lot of people like that because those elk leave the park in the fall and they're open to hunting. That herd's around 6,000-7,000 now. It used to be probably around 25,000 in the late 80s, early 90s. We could discuss, if you wish, what the ecological impacts of that were, environmental impacts. So that has been a big change. Well, what have fewer elk caused? Well, willow and aspen have released, are growing better. Not so much an expansion and distribution, although that is happening in some places, especially with aspen. You should see it out there. I was out last week counting trees that big that have all come back in the last 10 years because of lessened elk browsing. And animals like beavers and Wilson's warblers and willow flycatchers and catbirds are all taking advantage of this. They're using this increased growth of riparian vegetation. And I just listed the things we studied. There's, 12-fold increase of beavers in northern Yellowstone, possibly an increase in northwest Yellowstone due to the same effect. I'm not talking about fish or amphibians and reptiles and insects, who cares about them, but they're probably really impacted by this change as well. And so this is continuing. And we just had a workshop on this in Portland, Oregon, a couple weeks ago at the Ecological Society of America meetings. So a gathering of hundreds of scientists to talk about Yellowstone ecosystem, wolf impacts on the ecosystem. And so this is a big deal. And you've heard all about it being International Wolf Center, folks, the controversy. Not everyone's on the same page, but we are getting there. We're gradually talking, working, and of course, the king of all, resolving problems is more data, information from the environment. And we're getting there, and wolves are there. Wolves have a signature on this, and it is changing. And so that's been a big part of it. I think what many of you like, and I'll finish here and then talk a little bit about capture. We catch wolves, we put collars on them. We're getting to be one of the bigger studies North America wide in capturing wolves, handling them. Although your home agency, Dave Meach's study in northern Minnesota, I think is well over 700 or 800 captures of wolves. We're over 500, but we've only been going 20 years. Dave's been going 50. 1968, I think that study started. So we're getting there, but that's you don't have a study unless, I hate to say it, nowadays you got to handle the animals. So we've done okay at that, and you get information on disease and genetics and things like that. But really, I think what's made Yellowstone resonate with a large group of people, especially IWC folks, is the stories. And I've studied wolves since I was 18 years old. I won't tell you how old I am now. Had a birthday last week. It's up there. Sorry about that, but people love the stories. And all of you who have been to Yellowstone probably have your own wolf story. And that's what makes me go around. I came out of graduate school straight scientist. We just want numbers. Just an anecdote doesn't get it done. Totally revising that mindset. Stories are what people have done for all our evolutionary history. We tell stories to connect with other people, and if you can do that, you become social and you win the world. That's why we won the world, because we're social species. And so telling stories about wolves in Yellowstone is what people have come to love, and we have bunches of them. 949 just died, this last couple of days ago. The Lamar Canyon alpha male, and he's been on a decline for a few weeks. And a bull bison got killed during the rut. They do that. Nature's cruel, but that's how they sort their lives out. They fight, they die. And he sat there on this carcass, possibly as a food source to get him through. Didn't work. So he died. His last days were rough watching him do that. And we picked him up and took him to a lab. So his whole carcass, that's unusual. We normally only take a sample and maybe their skull for a collection that we have in Yellowstone, or it's pushing 200 skulls. We think that's really valuable. But we want to know what he was only 5'6". We actually didn't collar him. He immigrated into the park from outside the park. But why'd he die? Average age of death for a wolf in Yellowstone is 5. Medium age of death is 6. He's right at that age. Why'd he die? We don't suspect distemper, but he's at the lab. So I'm sorry, I can't tell you about that. Then 9/11. This guy, we want to blow up. Maybe we can use IWC media outlets or not. The park wants us to use theirs, but old alpha male of the prospect pack was doing great. This is about a year and a half ago. So April 2016 is doing great. Starting then, he just goes into a long, slow decline. September, he's by himself. He had lost probably a quarter to a third of his body weight. Just looking at him, trying to estimate that. He attacks and kills an elk by himself, alone, in September. This is when elk are in their best shape of the year. Because, winter's hard for them and their condition kind of declines. Summer's good for them and their condition kind of improves. They go into winter in great shape. This September's kind of going into winter around here. He kills his elk alone. Junction pack moves in, sees him, kills him, and eats the elk. This is just, I try not to be, why? You can't do that. You can't do it. Nature, this is how they work. It works, we work. Lots of examples of humans doing stuff like this, but it's not the end of the story. So we, as part of our program, take his head because of the skull collection I just talked to you about. And we have this guy who cleans up our skulls, and we put him in the Heritage Center at Yellowstone, and hopefully that's a collection that will be available to people for hundreds of years. But this guy takes the flesh off, and 9/11's jaw is in half. I had it today. preparation for this webinar to hold it, because it's like staggering that he lived 4 months with a jaw. He got kicked by an elk or a bison, busted his jaw clean. It's, if you look at the, I don't know how to do this here. If you look at the mandible, you can see it was swollen where bone had tried to fuse it together, but it was his jawbone was in two pieces. The pain and agony of that. He lived for 4 more months. Could you imagine what a human being would have been doing? They would have been in the hospital. They would have been on IV fluids. They've had multiple surgeries. They would have had painkillers, the whole battery of whatever it takes to keep a human alive. He just walked around. And I mean, looking at him, you didn't even really know. He looks a little odd, slowing down, losing a little bit of weight. Well, other than that, looks okay. Busted jaw. Kills an elk last day of his life, and then is killed by another pack. I mean, I could go on. I have more examples written down. I promised the organizers of this I would go 5 minutes. Sorry about that. So maybe we should stop there. There's some footage of how we catch wolves. See if anybody's got any questions.
That sounds great, Doug. So I've got the footage all ready to go. So whenever you're ready, I will switch right on over to that.
Go for it. You want me to talk while this is going?
Yeah, feel free.
So this is in the thoroughfare, which is the most remote region of lower 48. And this is quintessential or perfect wolf darting. This is a young wolf. It's a female because it's got a very pointy muzzle and a slight skull. 9 times out of 10, I can tell the sex of wolf before I get to it just by watching from the helicopter. Males and females also behave differently when you chase them with a helicopter, but she's just feeling the effects of the drug here. But you can see the beautiful thoroughfare region. This is a different event. And this is how darting got invented. You can see the deep snow wolf cut back there. They all do different things. That was a black wolf that got hit. Actually, one of the rare homozygous black wolves that we have. Most of them die. So most black wolves we have are heterozygous. But and you can see how they're going slow through the deep snow, and we use that to our advantage. They don't always do that. And in fact, I was going to show you some other footage, and I forgot to send it to Cameron today. But I really want to show it to you of what it's like when it's not deep snow. Brutal darting. Like not darting, like hunting. It's such hard shooting, but I forgot to do that. Anyways, this is, cover their eyes so snow don't blow into it. This is what we call light wolf. He's big. The drugs weren't getting to him too much, but that's good. We can get a collar on, weigh in, draw blood when they're light. But that's a big boy in the thoroughfare pack. A very cool pack that lives in the most remote region of lower 48. He's only 32 miles from a road, which is kind of pathetic. This is hard to see. I don't know if you can see me, but there's a female wolf that's going to run into that small island of trees. Females are the hardest wolves to catch. You can see her go in, very smart. She's been darted before, so she knows the drill. She knows what to do. But like a lot of us, we need to be secure. We need to feel good about things. She didn't like that stand of trees because it's an island of trees. It's too small, and she squirts out to the right. See her running out there to the right? She wanted to be in the main forest. She makes a run for it, and me and the pilot saw it too late, and he couldn't get that helicopter over there fast enough. This is a slower flying helicopter, and we would have hit a tree, so he had to pull out. That might have been a shot right there. I didn't take it because the trees were coming up, didn't want to hit it. She got away because she was smart. She had been darted before. She thought through that. I'm not anthropomorphizing. She was calculating what's going on. Her collar was dead. This has audio. I'll let you hear the audio. This is the pilot, helicopter picturing, and me talking, trying to get a wolf in Lamar Valley near Druid Peak. GoPro on top of my helmet.
You want to get her? I got a dart in my hand. Yeah. Or you want to wait and see? Let's get her. That's really she'll good. Move fast when she gets to the open. Yeah, let's do that. All right, Lenny, dart is going. Deep snow there. He's struggling. I got it. I'm in. I'm loaded. Okay.
The wolf, you'll just see her. And I'm sorry to say, I missed the first shot. You know what happens.
I don't think she's a dart.
You didn't hear the cussing, which is good. Somebody must have cut that out.
Okay. She's going downhill. Okay.
That's the pilot being nervous.
Okay, I'm loaded.
Going in again. Hit her this time.
Nice job, Doug.
Yeah, so she was a smart wolf because, like I said, these females, for one, they all think they can outrun the helicopter. Male wolves, they're big, they're slow, they don't think that way. I've never met a female wolf that didn't think she could outrun the helicopter. And the other thing is that second female, it was a top of a mountain, small mountain, and there's no snow on the top because the wind hits it. Lots of wind always here in Yellowstone in the winter, and so it was snow free. And so the reason I got a second shot at her is because she did not want to leave that area of no snow because she felt comfortable. She had good footing. She could get away. She could, juke and jive, whatever you call it. She felt confident there. Confidence is a big part of life too. And if she got in that deep snow, it bogged her down. She felt like she couldn't get away. She couldn't outrun the helicopter anymore. So we took advantage of that. She wouldn't leave the top of the mountain. I probably could have fired 3 more times because she was just going to stay there on top, deep snow all around, but there was forest. If she had plowed through some chest deep snow, she could have got to some forest, and she didn't do it. So I probably could have taken another shot. But at some point we pull back because, this is research. This is a national park. We're not going to chase them more than 5-10 minutes. Okay. Sorry for talking so long.
Not a problem at all. So I do have quite a few questions. For those of you who joined us a little bit later, feel free to send in questions into the Q&A tab. You're welcome to send in as many questions as you like. We're going to try to get through as many of them as possible. So I'm just going to go ahead and start with the first one, Doug. We have Dale asking if there is confirmation that the dominant male in the canyon pack is still active. These animals, they said that one of the canyon animals was killed, and they were wondering if the dominant male in that pack is still active.
Yeah, great question. And I wish I knew the answer. We don't know. So his collar's out. That's Wolf 712. He was the mate of the white canyon alpha female who was illegally shot in Yellowstone in April. First such case like that. And we've had no movement on that case at all. And 712, her mate of 9 years, his collar's out. I don't have the heart to sometimes go after these older guys and gals. Just they get older and kind of leave them alone. But we used to get information on them from remote cameras set up at carcass dumps. So when wildlife gets hit on roads in Yellowstone, there's designated places where they take the carcasses. So you don't have wildlife all over the roads eating the carcasses. And occasionally, not often, but occasionally we and the bear researchers put up remote cameras there, and we will get snapshots of the canyon pack. In the old days, the canyon female and 712. We haven't got any of those all summer. So we don't know. We suspect that they, losing her might have been, although she was kind of on the outs of the pack when she got shot, but maybe that was the straw that broke the camel's back, that pack just fizzled. And he He was an old guy too. He might have died, but we do not know.
All right, thank you. So, Michael asks, in the colleges that you went to, what sort of majors were you looking at throughout your college career?
I'm a sappy, idealistic guy, and being like that in life, I'm lucky I've made it through because I just did what I loved. And like I said at the start, yeah, my career's been wolves without a doubt, but I love nature and I hung with it. In fact, I did people give me a hard time for this all the time. I did my PhD on beavers because, to be honest, there was no project on wolves at the time. But I wanted to learn about science. I wanted to stay with wildlife. I wanted to study nature. So I did beavers. But I went to University of Idaho for my undergraduate degree in wildlife biology. And then because I had worked several summers on Isle Royale and actually for Dave Meacham, Minnesota too. This is ancient history. This is like 70s, early 80s. But yeah, I did my master's with Rolf Peterson at Michigan Tech, who you guys have probably heard of. He's still on Isle Royale. And then my PhD, University of Nevada, Reno. But my study area was northern Minnesota for beavers. So yeah, but the main thing is I just kept with it. Perseverance is your best survival scientific skill by far.
Excellent. And do you feel good about the current wolf population numbers in Yellowstone? Pamela asks about the population in Yellowstone.
Yeah, Pamela, things have really stabilized. It's really interesting, from reintroduction, 95 through 97 through about 2007, the population was bouncing around all the time. And we had good years and bad years. We had a couple of distemper outbreaks and the population immediately rebounded since 2008. And, nature's never stable, never flat. So I don't want to indicate that to you, but we have been approximately 100 wolves, 10 packs since 2008. Now, granted, we count wolves early winter. We had 108 wolves and 11 packs last early winter. But that's still hovering around this 100 wolves and 10 packs mark for about 10 years. So that appears to be the carrying capacity of wolves in Yellowstone. And that's a long time for the population to be stable. We're kind of wondering what's going to happen next. Are they just going to stay there, or is something going to cause them to increase, or maybe even decline, another disease outbreak or something? And that's the value of long-term research. We're going to stick with it and try and figure that out.
Excellent. Christy asks, what is the numbering process for the wolves? She's heard of several famous wolves, such as 832F, 755M. Was there a wolf number one? How does the numbering go throughout the wolf population in Yellowstone?
So it's a little bit back and forth. The way we do it now is every collared wolf in the GYE, which is the acronym for the Greater Yellowstone Ecosystem, which is the park surrounded by Idaho, Montana, Wyoming. And we're kind of the central gatekeepers of the numbers. But when a wolf gets caught, it gets a collar and a number. And so we're well over 1,000 now. It's a little bit cumbersome, but it always wasn't that way. So Mike Phillips, who, he was actually the original project leader. I was the original project biologist. We both started in 1994. I came from Isle Royale, Minnesota. Mike came from North Carolina Red Wolf Project. And that project always had a very low number of wolves. And he was only there, I think, 8 years. And they numbered every wolf they knew about, collared or uncollared. So that's how we started. There were uncollared wolves out there. They had a number because, we only had 21 wolves that first year. Well, they were all collared that year, but they had some pups. We kept track of them based on pelage color. I remember a female died with a litter of pups inside of her. She was pregnant. We numbered those pups. So there's a bunch of wolves early on. And then the original numbers were wolves that came from Canada. And actually, I don't know the story. Maybe Dave Meach would know it, or Steve Fritz or Ed Banks, but there was no number wolf one that came to Yellowstone. But so we started off with numbers that came from Canada, and then we started numbering every wolf we knew of, which was, I think, a bad idea. And so we dropped it to just handled wolves. And then once wolves moves outside the park, because wolves constantly are moving around and they don't know anything about boundaries, we coordinated the system for the entire Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. And so that's how we number them. I would kind of like to switch. I don't think a lot of people agree with me, to a system that's easier to keep track of. Like, this is 2017. So if we catch a wolf early winter this year, it would be 17. And if it's a male, it's an odd number. If it's a female, it's an even number. So the number would be 1701 or 17-01. You'd know the year and you'd know the sex right off the bat. Right now you have a wolf, 1091. What's that mean? Well, that's the female and the canyon pack, or excuse me, the wapiti pack. But it takes you a second. What's 1091? So, but anyways, that's how the numbers got put on.
Great. Pamela says she's from Indiana and she's been to Wolf Park in Battleground many times. She's heard that you did some work there a few years ago. Have you ever been to Wolf Park? Have you ever worked there at all?
I know Wolf Park very well. And so for historic reasons, that is the very first wolf job I ever had in my life. I've been interested in wolves since a small boy and did all the things that, kids do when they love an animal. Wrote Wolf Biologist starting at age 12 or 13. And my first break was Wolf Park. And I went there as a wolf mother. I know I'm a guy, but that's what they called me, wolf mother, because I used to have to hold the bottles, with milk in it, and the pups would knead with their paws against one on my chest, the other on my arm. I nursed 4 pups, Sasha, Sirgai, Mephisto, and Faust, for 6 weeks at Wolf Park. Worked with Eric Klinghammer and Pat and others at Wolf Park. And so that was my first big break in life, arguably my main break, because Eric Klinghammer was on Rolf Peterson's graduate committee at Purdue. The Isle Royale Wolf Study was originally based out of Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana. And I had applied for a job on Isle Royale the summer of 1979. And because I was working at Wolf Park, Eric Klinghammer gave me a good recommendation. And I went to Isle Royale that summer, and I worked there on and off for 15 years, as well as in Northeast Minnesota with Dave Meach at Cushry Field Lab and Ely. And that, I think, is what got me in Yellowstone. So yeah, Wolf Park started it all.
That's pretty amazing. Gene asks, what do you think should be done on Isle Royale now that the population has gotten down to 2 wolves?
Yeah, that's a frequently asked question. This is a biased answer because of what I just said. I did my master's with Rolf Peterson, and I worked there for 15 years. But I think it's a clear example of where reintroduction is needed. And I think this has been, the reason I hesitate is because, this has been a Park Service issue. What do we do? And I think when I very much support Park Service philosophy about intervening in nature, you don't do it. You kind of let nature take its course. However, there are exceptions like Yellowstone. We reintroduce wolves here. Talking about wolf reintroduction to Isle Royale, or actually augmentation before the last 2 wolves are dead. If it's human caused, if the problems or the events or the issues are human caused, then that's a departure from naturalness, from natural regulation. Now, the other thing is, what we could argue is what is left in the world today that's natural? What hasn't humans influenced? Because why do we have this bottleneck, this inbreeding going on in Isle Royale? Well, we have climate change, so we don't have this ice bridge to Isle Royale anymore. I mean, it used to be something of every 10 years, there'd be 7, 8, there'd be an ice bridge. Now, every 10 years, there's an ice bridge every 1 or 2. And so that's just not enough. There is, when we do get ice bridges, the wolves walk around, leave the island, come to the island. Late 90s, Rolf Peterson, John Vistas documented this very well. It kind of gave the population another boost because of the genetic diversity that added. But that's a human-caused issue. Secondly, it's probable that disease reached Isle Royale because of humans. A dog with parvo got out there in the early 80s. And so that's another human-caused event. I think the other thing, too, is looking at the future of Isle Royale without wolves in it is not a great ecological picture, because you're going to get into moose increasing and crashing, eat themselves out of house and home, and increasing crashing. And I think, climate change is a hurricane. Not to have any reference to what's going on in Houston right now, but it's a hurricane, and trying to withstand that and try and live through that is going to be very challenging. But here's a case where a tweak that's not going to cost much and isn't going to be hard to do. They're kill wolves in Ontario right across the water there. You just need a few wolves, and I think this is going to it'll really change the ecosystem. And value judgments of nature are always bad, but changing for the better. Keeping things more less boom bust, a more balanced community, and it's very, very similar to what we did in Yellowstone.
Great, thank you. Denise asks, how do you know how much drug to use when capturing? Do you use the same drug at different times? Are there regulations for this? And if you use drugs at different times, is there a reason for that?
Yeah, I mean, drugging wolves is relatively easy compared to other wildlife. Like ungulates are hard. It's tough to drug an ungulate. Easy to do a wolf because wolves and dogs are so much alike. And veterinarians are drugging, I don't know, thousands, millions of dogs every single day. That when they get those drug cocktails figured out, we just use it on wolves. And the other thing is wolves are about one of the toughest critters I've ever come across. Although beavers are pretty tough too, but beavers can get hypothermic under some conditions. Wolves just take anything you can throw at them. And so the drug we use is the impacts on wolves are well known because of dogs, and it has got a huge buffer against overdosing. It might be, I shouldn't say this, it would be really hard to overdose them on the drug we use. That they would just be asleep for longer. So, and this is Tilazol, and that's a commercial name. The actual drugs in there, I'd have to get a vial and read it off to you, but it's a cocktail. It's a mixture, and it's exceedingly safe for them. And we use, when you're flying around a helicopter with a gun, you want to reduce life to its simplest elements. You don't want to be thinking about a lot of things, although you do, and that's what stress does to you, but you want to focus on one thing. And, it's very risky. You could die, the helicopter could crash, a gun could go off in the wrong direction. So your checklist, you want it to be very, very short. And so you don't want to be thinking about the dart very much. So it's a standard dose for an 80-pound wolf or a 130-pound wolf. The drug will get both of them on their side. And if we've got a boost, put a little bit more drug in the 130-pound wolf, we can. Normally we don't have to. And so that drug dose is 550 milligrams of Tilazol for an adult wolf. And that has worked beautifully for 15 or so years. The first 5 or 6 or 7 years, we were experimenting with a kind of a different mixture of drugs. And we've settled down on this, sometimes we're over 600 milligrams, which is pretty high, but we've settled down. Now, if you're trapping wolves, they don't get as worked up because you're not chasing them in a helicopter, and you use a jab stick, and you get about maybe 350 milligrams of Tilazol. But because we're chasing them, we use 550. You got to overcome that adrenaline curve that they generate when you chase them.
Excellent, thank you. Just as a reminder to participants, if you have a question, feel free to throw it into the Q&A tab. I do see a few raised hands. Unfortunately, I'm not able to answer raised hands, but I can certainly take any questions in the Q&A tab. Denise is asking that John Trapp shared some of his experience with the acclimation pens, and he shared what it was like during the reintroduction. Could you share a little bit about your experience during the reintroduction days?
Wow, I have to be careful that I don't tell too many stories, but yeah, I mean, the coolest thing was, this is a big deal. You're close to wolves all the time. I mean, I fed them a lot. We fed them twice a week. They were in the pens 10 weeks, 2 winters, and we had wolves in pens outside of that too. So I just spent a lot of time with wolves, which is which is cool. And seeing them respond, trying to catch them. I learned how good they are at observational learning. But one of the more interesting things is when Bill Clinton came with Hillary and Chelsea to see the wolves. Not only was there a lot of press and a lot of Secret Service, but number 9, one of our earlier wolves that had a first litter that helped kind of repopulate Yellowstone. A tree fell in the pen and all our pups got out. And we were actually trying to leg hold trap them. They were very safe traps. They had pads, so they didn't hurt their feet. But we were setting traps outside the pen to try and get them. And the day the president was coming, obviously I was worried about, Secret Service person or the president stepping in a leg hold trap. Bad deal. So I was pulling by myself all these little traps we had set for the pups. And I was out digging one up, and I looked up, and there was number 9 on the other side of the fence. I'm working outside the fence. She's on the inside, just staring at me. And I didn't even hear her come up, just silently. And she just came up, and wow, what a connection. And, I've had that a few other times in my career. Why do they come up? They should not trust us. They should not like us, but they would come up, and you have that moment of connection with another species, another creature, and it's really cool.
Excellent. We have another viewer asking, you mentioned that elk numbers are down. Could their lower numbers also be due to not only just direct predation, but also the effect of having a predator on the landscape?
Wow, what a question. That is a big question. So they're talking about indirect effects, and that's a big topic. I don't know if you're talking about, this contention. I don't agree with it, but, other people have written about it, primarily Scott Creel, that having wolves in the landscape lowers elk pregnancy because of the effects of fear. They're worried about wolves, so they eat less, they put on less body fat. And if you don't reach a minimum threshold of body fat, you don't get pregnant. But I don't know if I go for that, because our pregnancy rates in northern Yellowstone are still very high 80s, 90%. Over 90% of the females that we catch every winter are pregnant. And this is very high wolf density. So that kind of doesn't line up. And I think there's other reasons for that too. But there's no question that indirect effects impact elk. It causes them to change their movements, probably their distribution, probably their group size, and all those are things that are different with and without predators. Can we say that caused the elk population to decline? I don't know. That is a different question. The direct effects are they kill them. Indirect effects are they impact their behavior. And is that part of the decline or not? I would say still an open question. I'm not necessarily, and I'm not one to say that there's no cost of that. Scott Creel just had a paper come out a couple months ago and accused some people of saying there's no cost to indirect effects. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying if that a reason for the decline, I think we need to study that more.
Excellent. Also, I just wanted to mention that Kimber and Pat from Wolf Park are watching, and they say hello. And
okay.
So along with that, we also have another viewer asking, have you noticed a change in the dialogue with those people who might have conflicts with wolves with delisting? Has that had an impact on the dialogue between people or between scientists and those that might be negatively affected by wolves?
I don't know. That's a tough one, because wolf love and wolf hatred are deeply emotional and value-laden positions. And, people changing their minds on that is tough. And so it's a very polarized debate. I think, we have to work more towards the middle. For example, people ask me all the time, are you in favor of hunting? Yeah, you got to have a compromise. And wolves do occasionally cause problems. You got to be able to take care of those problems. And what that does is that gives you an ability to talk with people who don't want wolves at all. And it's hard to talk with people who don't want any wolves killed at all either. But, in this day and age, we've got to get towards that middle. It is a fact that wolves can cause problems. They do occasionally. And people hunting wolves makes them feel better. It's a recreational opportunity. And so when you have those positions, it opens a dialogue and people are more willing to talk. There is a certain number of people that there will never be a resolution of anything. It's a waste of time having those conversations. But I think a lot of people are open to reasonableness, which means nobody gets everything of what they want. And so I think that's helped some of my dialogues, but has it been a sea change where it affects populations? A lot of my state colleagues say it has. Their phone rings a lot less, especially during hunting season, because people feel better being able to hunt wolves. They don't feel good when they're listed. It makes them angry. And so I do think that has been a productive step forward, granted a small step, but I think it's been effective.
Excellent. And this is sort of tertiary, but we have a educator from North Carolina who wanted to know what your thoughts are on the project in North Carolina with the red wolf and where you think that might go.
Tough one there, because they've just pulled back. I think I've had to review that plan a few times. I haven't been part of the recent discussion, but they've kind of pulled back to Alligator River National Wildlife Refuge. Of course, red wolves, the big issue there is, what are they? I think most of the data is starting to accumulate, although I know, and I shouldn't say I'm friends with, but we've had several conversations, Ron Nowak, who's made the argument that red wolves evolved during the Pleistocene. But I think more of the data is coming in that they're a hybrid between gray wolves and coyotes, which puts their status as a species into question, although some people argue the endangered species act should manage for hybrids as well. I think that's a classic example of not a lot of space, not a lot of wild space. So the wolves, where they're problem free, it's a very small area. There's interbreeding with coyotes, so you have to be constantly vigilant for that. So I think to have red wolves is going to be a situation of you're going to have to manage them forever, which to a lot of people is unpalatable, needlessly expensive. But it's a great example of, we have a lot of people in the world and wolves need space, and there isn't a lot of space. And then coyotes used to not be to the East Coast. Now they are. And so these are two very much human things that we did. And are we going to live with what we did, kind of thing? And that might mean we have a new species through our actions, a hybrid, but nonetheless, it's a new species. And it needs space. Are we going to give it that chance to live, and we give it space? So I think those are questions I don't necessarily have the answer to. They're tough questions. A lot more people on the East Coast than in the West, although the West is headed that way. Those are human issues that we're going to have to work out.
Excellent. We have Kathleen and Dale who are asking about mange and that effect on the wolf population in Yellowstone National Park. Is it something that's heavily affecting the population? Is it managed, etc.?
It's not managed because we probably can't do anything about it. I heard once from a veterinarian, if you see mange on a wolf, it's too late to do anything. Secondly, we have this debate about, is mange natural or not? It was in the North American continent, but it wasn't in Montana, and it was deliberately introduced to coyotes to kill wolves in, I think, 1909, as another form of wolf control. And so we've had a grad student, Emily Almberg, work on that. She's graduated and works for Fish, Wildlife, and Parks now. We have another student doing a great job, Ellen Brandell at Penn State. She's looking at mange too, and it definitely does not help. If you get mange, your survival probability goes down. It doesn't go down as much as we originally thought. You can recover from it. And we're looking at, what causes it to spread within the pack, what causes it to spread between packs. It's probably something that affects more than just wolves, for sure coyotes, probably other carnivores. But Ellen is looking into that in great detail. But it looks like it's this quiet fuse that's constantly burning. But it's kind of subsided. It used to be much worse 3-4 years ago. It seems to hit in winters more, but it's not as prevalent now in the park as it used to be, and we're trying to understand why.
All right, excellent. We have another viewer asking, will you be attending the 2018 Wolf Symposium? And on top of that, do you have a favorite wolf that you have studied? And if so, why?
I don't know if I have a choice about the 2018 Wolf Conference. I mean, how can I miss that? That's IWC flying the flag as best they can. And plus, who wouldn't want to go? It's 4 or 5 days of nothing but wolves. Of course, I'd like to do that. Favorite wolf is tough. 760, who was part of the Thoroughfare Pack for a long time, who I handled a couple of times and was the single biggest wolf we ever caught, 148 pounds with an empty stomach. And the fact that he lived in the deep, dark forests of the most part of the lower 48 was also special. I also like Wolf 14, kind of a female in the Soda Butte Pack, again, that remote region. What's interesting to me about all these years of wolf studies is how you can study them and you kind of get to figure things out quantitatively, which means statistically, and you put numbers on it, and then you get a wolf that defies all of your analyses. It just does its own thing. And 14 was kind of a wolf that held the glue. She was a wolf that held the pack kind of together for a while, a low number, early wolf. And so she was important. And of course, number 9, the story I told you about 9, I spent a lot of time with her. And so she was special. There's a couple times we could have caught her late in her life, and that we didn't. Maybe I should have, but so she disappeared. Her collar went out. She disappeared. We'll never know why. Maybe that's a fitting story to the end for her. And that developed in me this kind of aversion to catching older wolves, which I don't know if it's good, but those are special ones.
Excellent. We have a teacher who's asking about collars. So what type of collars you might use, what is the usual cost? And she was also wondering if there are ways that, say, her classes would want to sort of help to fund anything over there in the projects. Is there any way that they could donate to that project and help purchase supplies or anything of that sort?
Oh yeah, no, it's the government no longer funds the lion's share of our work here. In fact, they only fund about 40% of it. So 60% of my budget is through outside donations and grants. So very much we need the help. But the collars we use 2 types. One's called a VHF, very high frequency, and that's just a collar that you wear, the wolf wears, and it emits a signal, and you track it. And they cost about $550. It's the very most basic technology, but they're the most reliable. They tend to work. The other type collar is it's a bandwagon. It's kind of a fad. Everybody's using them. They're GPS collars, global positioning system collars. They communicate with satellites. They send you the location so you can look at your computer. They hold them in the collar. You can download them. They're very fancy. They cost $3,500 to $4,000 per collar. But the fact, like wolves in the Arctic, you can sit in your office. It's dark and cold, and you can find out where they're going. Huge advantage. But they break a lot. Making collars is not a cutting edge industry like cell phones or anything where you make a ton of money. The profit margin for these radio collar companies is very small. So they are the GPS collars. We had 5 bust one winter. I won't tell you the company's names because I probably shouldn't, but we switched companies because of this. But if they work, there's nothing better. They're expensive, and you got to pay for the satellite downloads and whatnot, but they're great when they work. But the issue is when they work.
All right, excellent. We've got a couple of other people also asking if there are ways that they can donate to the projects and whatnot. Is there a place that they can particularly go to help with public donations?
Yeah, the foundation is called Yellowstone Forever, and I'm old school, not as old school as Dave H, but I'm old school, so I don't know the website, but their phone number is 406-586-6303, and they have a wolf fund set up, and you could call that number or look online under Yellowstone Forever. I'm sure you'd find something, and just get in contact with them if you so desire to help. Yeah, sure.
Excellent. We're getting near the end of the time of our program here, so I'm kind of scanning for the common questions that are going through the chat right now. One that's been coming up quite a bit is the idea of buffer zones around Yellowstone. Is there discussion about that going forward, or is that sort of off the table, or is there anything going on with that these days?
Yeah, that's a commonly asked question, and I don't know if I read this screen right, but if there's 26 questions in the docket, I better hurry up. But yeah, that is an important issue, and the states have been good to work with. You know, wolves are completely protected in Yellowstone, and then there's hunting outside the park, and so there needs to be kind of a transition zone because a lot of these packs spend 98, 99% of their time in the park, and they see folks like you guys watching who look at them through binoculars and spotting scopes. The person with a rifle does something very different to them. They don't know that. So we've got to have a transition zone from their protection to that hunting. And by and large, we have hunting units primarily in Montana, Wyoming, that border the park that have lowered quotas. That's not zero hunting, but it's less hunting. And we'll never get none because people have different values, the different constituencies. And we've heard a lot of arguments about why there should be no hunting further out. But again, it's that difficulty of trying to find that compromise, that middle ground. We are studying this, the impacts of removing wolves from packs that are, what happens when an alpha female is taken out, or the breeding dominant female versus another animal. But we're looking at all that. But we live in a day and age that not everybody gets what they want. And so most of these wolves don't range one hunting district out, in other words, 2 districts out. They usually confine it to the hunting district immediately adjacent to the park. And we've worked with the states effectively to limit that harvest. So I think we're on the right track.
Excellent. And no problem. I'm sure that we're going to try to get through as many of these as possible. If it's all right, near the end, what I might do is send you a few questions after the program, and I will put those answers on the archive of this webinar.
Sure.
Pamela asks, how long does a radio collar typically last between GPS and VHF collars? What's the typical lifespan of a collar?
Real quick, yeah, so a VHF is about 3 years, but we've had them last up to 5. They're always beeping. And then for a GPS, it's weird. You're programming them. So you may get them, and it says right off the bat, you get 30,000 locations. Allocate them any way you want. So if you do 1 per day, it might last 4 years. If you do 48 per day, it may last 1.5 years. So there's actually computer programs where you can take, because it's got a battery, and each location costs a certain amount of battery power. So you can take it and have that collar plugged into your computer, and it can say, how do you want to allocate these 30,000 locations or 40,000 locations, because you have a bigger battery. And you can type in 1 per day, it tells you how long it'll last. 48 per day, every 30 minutes. We have a lot of collars we do that with. It'll last 1.5 years. So you play with it to get that optimal time period. So it varies, except for a VHF, which just has a magnet. You can't plug it into the computer. You take the magnet off, it starts beeping, and it beeps for 3 years. I've had a couple last 5. So that's a great bonus.
Excellent. I've also got a couple people asking about pups in Yellowstone, and the populations. Have they been affected by disease, especially in the northern range? Have there been effects on why there might be pup populations or not so much survivability in Yellowstone National Park in recent times?
Well, we've had good years and bad years with pups, and the bad years are usually associated with disease, and the primary disease is distemper. Most every wolf we catch has been exposed to parvovirus. We're not quite sure what parvovirus does. And this year, we only have, I think last time I checked count, and I'll be a little rusty on this, so don't hold me to it, 19, 20 pups, which is low. We can have double that quite easily. We have no evidence of disease yet, but it could be. We lost a few key litters early. The alpha female, the lead female of 8 Mile pack was killed by an elk or a bison. She was pregnant with 5 pups, so we lost that litter. 821 lead female of the Prospect Peak pack gave birth to pups and then was killed by another pack of wolves. We lost that litter of pups. Junction Butte, we don't really know what happened. They might have localized, but they might have lost the litter. Molly's pack, we cannot figure out what they're doing. I cannot believe a pack that large doesn't have pups unless we haven't found them yet. and they're relatively isolated away from other wolves. So is that due to disease? Unlikely, but don't know. So yeah, it's down. Pups are down this year. This just could be density dependence. But we don't have evidence of disease yet, although we still could get information of that. But it just seems to be a few unlucky events. But yeah, it's a moderate year.
All right, excellent. And I'm getting a ton of questions stating that they want to thank you very much for your time. And I want to thank you as well. I think that that's an excellent program, and we're going to wrap it up there. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we depart?
I feel bad. There's 26 questions in the queue. I'm a long-winded guy. I apologize to those 26 people.
Not a problem. I'll make sure that I relay some of the questions that we haven't already gone over in the rest of this webinar, if that's all right with you, and maybe I can add those to the archive. So thank you all very much for participating. Doug, thank you for spending so much time with us. We very much appreciate all the stories and all of your sincere answers as well. Thank you very much, and we'll see you all next time.
Happy to do it.